It has always been about silencing anti-Israel protests and then using that new expanded, that new precedent that you set against the First Amendment and expanding on that by declaring anything and everything a terrorist. Is this even sourced? Yeah, the source of this Heritage.org paper is the hallucinations of a madman or a collection of madmen. That's the source of it.
Holy, that is so crazy.
Not trying to glaze, but I will say your commentary has had a super significant influence on me and the people in my life. My super right-wing father, my family's Jewish, but he is not, recently told me he now supports Palestinian emancipation after I brought up some points from you, Noah, and my own research. Thanks for all you do. Free Palestine. Yeah. There's no metric for there's no metric for authenticity if you are empathetic. If you're empathetic, that means you're not fucking real. You know what I mean? You're fake. You're phony. No one is really empathetic. You're fucking making that shit up. And I think it's because a lot of people only duke it out online, if that makes sense. Like if all of your experiences are shaped by, if all of your interpersonal relationships and all your experiences are shaped by online back and forth, then yeah, that's very different than how you would operate in the real world. And therefore, because that's most of our social development now, especially in the post-COVID world, unfortunately, people think like being an empathetic human being and caring for others is fake. You're virtue signaling. Whereas vice signaling, on the other hand, is a true metric for authenticity. Being a bad person, like openly being a bad person, unironically is seen as a unironically seen as like being a real one, you know? And that's why there's people that like aren't even all that invested in being a right-wing ideologue that can simply present themselves as such, as Mingold, okay? And of course, their output is all that matters if they're a content creator, as I've said time and time again, and are able to embrace larger and larger audiences as a consequence of that by vice signaling, by saying what is expected of them, by giving the audience exactly what they demand. And there are moments of honesty. Okay, there are moments of honesty in that process where, like, Asman will sometimes be like, yeah, I don't care about this. I'm just saying it, you know? Or, yeah, I'm saying it because it's popular. What are you going to do about it? And it's, that's what it is. That's that straight up. Like, Trump kind of tapped into this too. Trump tapped into this. He is honestly dishonest. Okay? He is honestly dishonest, and people see that as like a measure of authenticity that is virtually impossible for anyone on the left to capture, especially if your values are motivated by being empathetic to others. You know? Why do you think being against Israel's actions is conflated, but being anti-Semitic by so many people after all the info that is just... No, because it's a defense mechanism, and Israel's development as a Zionist, a settler colonial project literally relies on the constant fears that if Israel doesn't exist as an ethno-religious supremacist state, then like all Jews will be killed and murdered and Holocaust will happen everywhere. And that intentional conflation has caused people to obviously learn the wrong lesson there. They look at Israel and perhaps for the past couple of decades until this last decade, people looked at Israel as a positive state. People associated Israel with positive values, right? With the endless faucet of pro-Israel propaganda coming from mainstream news, while never really seeing what Israel was truly doing to the Palestinian population. Most people were like, yeah, Israel's good. And if you hate Israel, you're anti-Semitic. That makes sense to me. But now that people are understanding that Israel is not good at all, okay, and indefensible, utterly indefensible, and that association is now a negative one. And I have not been able to explain this to a lot of people that are not anti-Semitic but are super pro-Israel. They just don't understand that at all. They like, it doesn't track. There's too much social conditioning and too much time that they've invested into believing that like this is a good conflation and not a negative one. And it's interesting. I know that it is not a positive conflation, and it's downright dangerous for the existence of Jews in the Western world, because my name is Hasan and I've lived in this country post 9/11. And if that conflation of like, for example, Islam and ISIS wasn't such a dangerous weapon, then the American media would not have lied and manufactured consent and implied that those two things are intertwined with one another over and over again in an effort to justify the war on terror. That's why I constantly make this comparison about Israel and ISIS, where it feels to me like, you know, people fucking run around and say, it always feels like, you know, pro-Israel people who are not anti-Semitic are running around making that association themselves for some reason without seeing how dangerous that outcome is, how devastating that outcome is for the overall safety of Jews in this country that might not want anything to do with Israel, as a matter of fact. Especially with this current government heavily leaning into that, because there's a lot of institutional allowance using anti-Semitism as a weapon to wield against the First Amendment, against due process. Like, a lot of people, I think, don't understand that this is simply the entry point for this administration to enact a very scary agenda, to make it so that any criticism of Trump inevitably will be prosecuted with the full extent of the law. You'll be a terrorist. But the entry point into it is through anti-Semitism, through claiming that you give a shit about anti-Semitism, and liberals have allowed this administration to continue doing so. They've allowed it. You see it. There's too much time and too much money that was expended by pro-Israel groups that center themselves around like Jewish advocacy groups, even though they're not. They're just Israel advocacy groups. And they have virtually invaded a lot of think tanks and colleges and whatnot to create this idea that like, yeah, this conflation is real. Israel is for the Jews and Jews are for Israel. And if you criticize Israel, you hate the Jews. There's like, think about it. There are I can't think of a single other instance where like shitting on Christians in a country that is like bouldering towards Christian nationalism right now, shitting on Christians in this regard does not get you this same level of punishment. Okay? Shitting on no other marginalized group will ever get you this level of punishment. As a matter of fact, it will get you promoted, really. Right? Yet. You're right. Yet. Do you have a single fact to back that up? Which part? Do you think that like white supremacist anti-black sentiment is something that will cook you up in this country? All the parts. What do you want me to source? I can source anything you want me to source. In terms of the money spent from Zionist groups like pro-Israel groups, I mean, that much is. I mean, look at AIPAC as a starting point. But yeah, in terms of the administration using anti-Semitism as a weapon to crack open and set very dangerous precedents against free speech, look at the ongoing legal battles that are taking place with Mahmoud Khalil, with the Turkish PhD student, with the Korean American who was almost deported but was stopped because they just couldn't find her. Yeah. This is a militant Zionist group threatening activists online with a deport list. A century-old Zionist group has resurfaced in the U.S. with a list of pro-Palestinian activists it wants arrested. Now, the funny part about this is that Beitar and ADL and all these other pro-Israel groups like Stop Anti-Semitism and whatnot were previously seen as like crackpots, not ADL, but Beitar and all these other ones. And now they're receiving a warm welcome. Now, let me tell you something. This is not a secret. This is not a secret at all. This is being done in broad daylight. If you pay close attention to some of the immigration enforcement stuff, you will recognize it, that is precisely what they're doing, right? They're already trying to create a chilling effect on speech by threatening, using the arm of the law, and threatening students that have engaged in activism. They're lying about them. And in some instances, they're not even lying about them. They're just simply saying, like, yeah, we don't like what you're saying. Okay? Here is the IHRA. Here's the person who created the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, saying weaponizing anti-Semitism makes students less safe. None of this, of course, matters because it's not about anti-Semitism. It's not about combating anti-Semitism at all. If you think that, you're fucking delusional. It has always been about silencing anti-Israel protests and then using that new expanded, that new precedent that you set against the First Amendment and expanding on that by declaring anything and everything a terrorist. It was never about keeping students safe. Of course not. What do you mean? Military presence on campuses do not keep students safe. Destroying free speech on college campuses does not make students safe. It's the exact opposite. But the thing I wanted to show you in terms of like facts on the matter, because it sounds like this scary conspiracy, it almost even sounds like an anti-Semitic conspiracy, right? Like, oh, Jews control the media, blah, blah, blah. Is that what you're saying? That's not what I'm saying at all. Here is Izzy Breen, who himself is Jewish. Not that it matters, but expanding on this, something that I've talked about a lot. Project Esther, a national strategy to combat anti-Semitism. Izzy says the biggest reason the government officials aren't giving any specifics about the criteria by which these arrests and deportations are selected is that the criteria is pro-Israel think tanks and advocacy organizations created lists of troublesome individuals and gave them to us. They're not hiding it. Beitar is one of these militant Zionist organizations, ultra-Zionist organizations that are insane. They're rabid. They're psychopathic. The fact that they are able to operate as a 501c3 on U.S. soil is insane. This sounds like an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, but not only is it real, the people who created these lists were super proud of it and put on papers on how to do it. This is a PDF from the Heritage Organization Foundation website, the Heritage Foundation website. Project Esther, a national strategy to combat anti-Semitism, National Task Force to combat anti-Semitism. This paired up nicely with Project 2025. This is something that I covered, something that I talked about when they revealed this. Okay, the Torah in the book of Esther, Megillah Esther, tells us that in the mid-4th century BCE, a thriving Jewish community in ancient Persia risked extermination. Haman, a Persian king, Ahasuerus, prime minister, vizier, angry because of Mordecai, a Jew, refused to bow him, told the king, there's a certain people scattered and separate amongst the peoples throughout all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws differ from those of every people, and they do not keep the king's laws. It is therefore of no use for the king to let them be. If it pleases the king, let it be written to destroy them, and I will weigh out 10,000 silver talents into the hands of those who perform the work. Bring it into the king's treasuries. Ironically enough, I'm currently playing out in the 1400s in Kingdom Come Deliverance. I'm on the mission now where I'm defending the Jewish quarters from Sigismund's pogrom. But having said that, it's not just about, this. This is just an entry point of the conversation. Here it is. Purpose. Named after the historic Jewish heroine who saved the Jews from genocide in ancient Persia, Project Esther provides a blueprint to counter anti-Semitism in the United States to ensure security and prosperity for all Americans. Tatslinkov, is this more enlightening for you? Are you learning things? Did you already check out after you said, do you have facts on the matter? Introduction. Anti-Semitism in the United States and America is alive and spreading. Hamas, October 7, blah, 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 blah. Current situation. The HSN's strategic purpose inside the United States is to generate internal political pressure to compel the United States government to change its long-standing policy of support for Israel. Within the United States, the HSN, which they're calling the Hamas Support Network, receives the indispensable support of a vast network of activists and funders with much more ambitious, insidious goals, the destruction of capitalism and democracy. As their ends align, the HSN, Hamas Support Network, and nihilist supporters indoctrinate the gullible into supporting Hamas and hating Israel to create the street mayhem that serves their ends. This network is nominally American, but benefits from the support of training America's overseas enemies. Its members hope to achieve their goals by taking advantage of our open society, corrupting our education system, leveraging American media, co-opting the federal government. and relying on the American Jewish community's complacency. Is this even sourced? Yeah, the source of this Heritage.org paper is the hallucinations of a madman or a collection of madmen. That's the source of it. The mission statement: the National Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism leads a coalition to dismantle the infrastructure that sustains the Hamas support network and associated movements, anti-Semitic violence in the United States of America within 12 to 24 months to restore equal protection under the law for all Americans. In the process, they dismantle free speech and due process and show America that they can do whatever the fuck they want, and it will expand on top of anti-Semitism. It will not just be anti-Semitism that they're combating. They will combat anti-Christian behavior. They will also combat anti-white behavior. Trump administration has already signaled that they were going to do that as well. Vision intent. Our intent is to organize and guide all willing and able partners. Anne, yemek geldi bu arada, getirir misin? Grab my food. Our intent is to organize and guide all willing and able partners in a coordinated effort that employs all available resources to combat the scourge of anti-Semitism in the United States. Here's Axios covering Project Esther. Everything that the Trump administration is doing right now, they are following through on this agenda. Ironically enough, the Project Esther document also ends with the first they came for the communists poem. Before their sources, hold on. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Ironically enough, they literally in the beginning talk about how they want to eradicate socialism from public discourse. Isn't that funny? They talk about how they must eradicate, they must eliminate. I would like to see all the food you just got. No. Worry about your own damn self, okay? They literally say we have to combat the Hamas support network because they're socialist and they want to undermine capitalism. And we have to go after these like scary people. And you know, first we must do it by first going after, not the socialists this time, but going after the people that we have branded as Hamas supporters in our censorious agenda. The guy who wrote this was an anti-Semite, right? And regretted everything. What? Martin Niemöller? I'm not talking about Martin Niemöller. Martin Niemöller was I think it was what is it, like a Lutheran or Protestant, whatever. He was a fucking German priest at the time. And he talked about how it was dangerous for him not to give a shit about anti-Semitism and originally supported the Nazis and then realized, they eventually came for me as well. Yeah, he was like a right-wing priest who didn't give a shit about the growth of the Nazi movement, only to realize far too late that the Nazis would eventually come for him. Martin Niemöller, I think, is a great analog for many otherwise progressive, but still liberal Zionist Jews in this country. And I think it'll be, and not just liberal Zionist Jews, liberal Zionists in general. It will be far too late by the time they recognize that they're cooked. Anyway, just some of my sources and some of my thoughts. Insane shit.
God damn, dude. Holy shit.